with the big band. We'll have two tunes at the end. And yeah, they'll take a little transition time in between. But it's going to be an easy night for me because a lot of this is student-led. So we're going to start off with the first tune, and the first combo. This is the North Star Combo.
Let me see what's really mine. and the door. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love. Thank you, thank you. I'd like to introduce the people playing. So over here on my far left, we have Angel and Hillary. Guitars, Matthew. And bass is Ezra. And now drums is Isaiah. And the next song that they'll be playing is It's Been a Very Long, Long Time.
polka dots on moonbeams, or polka dots and moonbeams, and we'll be singing a little bit. But first, I'll introduce the people in the band. On alto, we've got Elena. We've got me on Mary, Daisy on both, Carden on drums, Vincent on bass, and Lucas on guitar.
Thank
We're giving different awards, different students that we feel should be acknowledged. And so this first award, this is called the, the Felix Jazzerus Award, kind of playing off the idea, there's Jazz Cats, so it's the fancy way, the Felix Jazzerus Award. So this is in recognition of a jazz cat who inhibited the spirit of jazz and whose infectious enthusiasm for jazz made the Wolfpack program that much better through the 2024 and 2025 school year. One thing in particular, I remember I was trying to teach, teaching jazz, sometimes it's a little daunting task, and trying to get kids to listen to it. I remember being in a football game, this student, I was just sitting there, she started singing bebop, which is just like after listening, I was like, yes, my mission has been complete. They are scatting at random times. My mission is complete. And this goes to Jamie Cam Thomas.
Hello guys, we are the last combo of the whole jazz night, and we're going to be featuring 3 songs, and we are called the Bebop Group because we're going to play some bebop songs that you all will enjoy very much. Our first song is called Fight Man. Alright, take it away. is Tank from Cowboy Bebop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but what? Oh yeah, I forgot to introduce the whole band. I'm so sorry. So here we have Gordon on alto sax. We got Jericho on trumpet. Nate on tenor sax. Tad on guitar. Elton on bass. Bell on drums. And me on trombone. Alright, we're gonna get started now.
and he's my biggest role model ever. And so me and my friends wanted to give him a little something before we graduate.
Yes! And the drum books I lent you. All right, so this is the Wolfpack Jazz A Big Band. So this first tune, we're going to do 2 2 3. This is an old jazz standard, kind of in the style of Count Basie. It's called I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. It's going to feature a little soul for Jericho. The Cruise in the middle. Here we go. One, two.
Thank
everything. Okay, so before we move on to our last tune, I have a couple of awards to give. We have 3 here. So this first one, this is the Quincy Jones Award. So this is a recognition of an exceptional sophomore or junior whose musical contributions to the Wolfpack Jazz program were invaluable throughout the 24 and 25 school year. This goes to Nate Abke. This next one is the Woody Herman Jazz Award. This is a recognition of an outstanding senior whose contributions of musicality, leadership, character, and service to the Wolfpack Jazz program were impactful throughout their tenure at COHS. This goes to JB. Last one is the Director's Award. I'll be honest, this is actually probably the toughest year for me to see a class of seniors go, because in case you didn't know, I student taught here right out of COVID. So the current seniors were the freshmen that I had during their concert band. So now honestly, I had a couple awards for them because there's so many that did so well throughout their musical career in high school, and I couldn't be more proud as an educator. So this one is the Director's Jazz Award, recognition of an outstanding senior whose musicality, leadership, character, and service to the program has been impactful throughout the year. And this is a student that didn't start actually in that concert band, but they were still very present within the jazz program. And they actually started Mr. Ma's guitar class.
Woo!
That's Mr. Ma.
Proud of you.
Yeah. This goes to Ezra Mellis.
Proud of you, Ezra.
I must mention that at the VAPA Gala, the Top Jazz Award, the Louis Armstrong Award, was given to Bella Marona. This has been such a great year with the jazz program, Jazz Big Band. This for 2 competitions in a row, we got straight superiors, which is the highest ranking you can get. And that was, from at least when I talked to the previous directors, the first time they've done that consecutively. So, great, you've done a great job. Again, when I started here during their freshman year, like I guess 3 years ago, we had probably 8 to 11 students in the Jazz Big Band total. Now we have 2 full big bands, a jazz intro class for freshmen who are trying to just start jazz. We have the jazz workshop class. So the jazz program is growing a lot, and it's all thanks to you parents and the students. So thank you guys very much. I want to give a couple of shout outs. Mr. Ma in the back. Shout out to administration. There's Mr. McCracken somewhere in there. All the teachers also as well. I see a couple of them. I want to give a shout out to Miss Kayla Chiswick up in the takes great care of this facility. We're going to close out with this Charles from the jazz repertoire. So Charles Mingus, in case you don't know, it was kind of crazy, lack of a better word, but his music had a mixture of gospel blues with jazz and improvisation, and he kind of puts the two together. And you can kind of hear within this composition a lot of, I guess, craziness, a lot of kind of interwoven soloing between composed melodies. And this is going to feature many students. I have to write down for so many. So this is going to feature, start with the Barry saxophone solo from Cam Thomas. Also here from Matthew Main on trombone. We're going to hear a little bit of what we call trading, which means someone will solo for a little bit, and then the other person solos, and then that person solos again. They kind of go back and forth. You hear a combination of that with Olivia Tong and Jeffrey Chen. We hear a little bit of trading between Matthew Tong